I found out my wedding was a transaction because I went back for a clutch. The rehearsal dinner had just thinned into champagne laughter behind the ballroom doors, and I was halfway to the elevator when I remembered my passport. My old staff card and the USB with my unfinished proposal were still inside the private fitting room. The hallway smelled like gardenias, pressed linen, and expensive wine, the kind of sweetness hotels use to make bad decisions feel elegant. I reached for the brass handle, then heard Graham Ellison laugh like a man who had never once expected the door to answer back. Brooke was inside with him, her voice soft enough to sound wounded, sharp enough to cut clean. "After tomorrow, how long before I can start using the host list?" she asked. And Graham answered without missing a breath. "Give it one season. Once Mary's name opens the private clubs, you'll be the one people remember." Someone moved a garment bag, and the plastic whispered against the wall while my hand stayed frozen on the handle. Brooke gave a small, satisfied laugh and said, "So I just have to survive watching her walk down the aisle." My stomach folded in on itself, but my mind went strangely quiet. Graham's agency had been struggling for months, and I had explained away every late call, every private dinner, every sudden interest he had in my members' club contacts. Now the evidence sat in the room in his own voice, not hidden in a phone, not guessed from a lipstick stain, not imagined by a nervous bride. He was not marrying me because he loved how I remembered people. He was marrying me because I remembered people. I looked down at the ring he had chosen under warm lights with a saleswoman smiling beside us. It no longer looked romantic. It looked like a key tag attached to my hand. I did not open the door, because they had already told me everything worth hearing. I stepped backward from the fitting room, turned toward the elevators, and let my heels strike the hallway hard enough to sound like an answer. I left the hotel before anyone had time to wonder where I had gone. The Pearl District apartment was still dressed for a bride, with ivory cocktail napkins stacked beside the sink, welcome boxes lined across the console, and a printed seating chart waiting for a life I had just stepped out of. I stood in the doorway long enough to hear the refrigerator hum, then set my clutch down and took off the ring before my hand could start shaking. It landed on the entry table with a small, hard sound, and that sound did more for me than crying would have. I packed only what had my name on it. My passport went into the suitcase first, then my laptop, my legal folder, my old staff card, the USB from the fitting room, and the notebooks where I kept years of guest preferences in my own shorthand. Graham's gifts stayed exactly where they belonged, on his side of the story. So I folded none of the silk scarves, touched none of the jewelry boxes, and left the designer bags lined in a clean row on the chair. When Lila Benton answered on the second ring, I did not have to explain much before she cut through my breathing with, "Take photos of what you leave, return the ring, and put everything in writing before he wakes up." So I took photos. Not for drama, but because evidence keeps a woman from being rewritten by a man with better manners in public. I sent one email to my attorney, one to the venue manager, and one to myself. Each sentence plain enough to survive daylight. I am canceling the wedding, returning the engagement ring, and withdrawing permission for my name or professional contacts to be used in any event materials. I typed, then read it twice, while the apartment flowers began to smell too sweet. When I finally zipped the suitcase, the room looked almost untouched, except for the empty space where I had stopped belonging. By the time the guests gathered under the glass garden roof, I was already in a hotel room across town, my suitcase against the wall. The ceremony space looked exactly the way Graham wanted it to look, with white flowers, linen chairs, chilled champagne, and important people to make his agency seem larger than it was. Club hosts stood beside authors he had chased for months, while two podcast sponsors compared calendars near the welcome table. My chair stayed empty, and that empty chair said what my voice never had to. Graham did not panic at first, because men like Graham always mistake silence for a woman preparing to forgive them. I knew the shape of him in that moment, adjusting his cuffs, smiling too tightly, telling his assistant I was being dramatic. When my phone stayed unreachable, he pushed one message through, the only channel not yet closed. "Don't make today ugly. Mary." Then the venue manager entered with my attorney's email, and the room changed before anyone had a chance to raise their voice. My name had been withdrawn from the event packet. My guest experience role was no longer active, and no one had permission to use my professional contacts to support the wedding. That was when the guests understood what Graham had refused to understand. They were not standing under that roof because he knew how to hold a room. They were there because I had called them, remembered their preferences, kept rivals apart, and made powerful people feel protected before they arrived. Russell Whitcomb walked in quietly, wearing the navy suit he wore to bookstore readings, and gave Graham nothing dramatic enough to twist later. "My daughter canceled this wedding lawfully," he told him, steady and low, "and her name should not be used here today." People began leaving in the kindest, coldest way possible. Coats requested. Champagne refused with 2 fingers over the glass. Brooke appeared near the side doors in pale satin, but one clubwoman recognized her, looked once at the empty bridal chair, and turned away with clean disgust. Graham did not lose everything the next morning, and that made it worse for him. His agency lights still came on. His assistant still answered calls. And the same framed posters of past salon nights still hung in the lobby like proof he used to belong somewhere. But the phones changed first. Hosts, who once replied within minutes, began sending polite delays. Sponsors asked who would handle guest confidentiality now, and one Seattle venue requested written confirmation that my name would not appear in any future pitch connected to Graham Ellison. Brooke stepped into the office like she had inherited a title, wearing cream trousers and a confidence she had not earned. She offered to manage the social strategy, then misspelled a novelist's name in an email to his publisher and sent a vegan dinner note to a whiskey sponsor who had hosted cattle ranchers for 20 years. By noon, Graham was rubbing his forehead while Brooke stood near his desk whispering, "I was trying to help you," and the silence after that sentence told her more than his temper could have. He needed competence, not comfort, and the woman he had planned to discard had been the one keeping his rooms from turning cheap. Then Brooke made the mistake that moved faster than any official announcement. At a private brunch, she told a table of women that I had panicked because marriage felt too adult, and one of those women had sat 3 rows from the empty bridal chair. The quote reached my father before sunset, and Russell Whitcomb did not embellish it, because plain facts travel cleaner in rooms where everyone knows how to listen. By the next week, a Seattle salon canceled, a podcast network paused its booking agreement, and a Portland club informed Graham that his agency was no longer on the preferred partner list. He called it unfair, but every door closing had a receipt attached. The canceled wedding had my attorney's email. The guest confusion had the withdrawn event packet. And Brooke's brunch comment had 3 people who heard it before dessert. When she asked him, "Do you still love me?" he looked at the unanswered inbox instead of her face. Love could not recover a room, could not rebuild trust, and could not remember which host refused to sit beside which donor. I did not disappear into mystery after the wedding collapsed. I rented a small studio near Silver Lake, the kind of place where the pipes complained at night and the coffee shop downstairs opened before the sun. The first morning there, Lila Benton called before I could pretend I was too busy to eat. And when she said, "Toast first, breakdown later," I laughed so suddenly it hurt. That laugh sounded rough, but it was mine. And nothing in that room needed Graham's approval to exist. For the first week, healing looked embarrassingly ordinary. I bought groceries without checking his stomach schedule, slept with my phone face down, and ate dinner sitting on the floor because I had not found a table I liked yet. Russell mailed me a box from his bookstore with 2 paperback novels, a jar of Oregon blackberry jam, and a note that read, "Your mother would have liked the way you left clean." I read that sentence 3 times. then made eggs for myself because the kitchen was small, quiet, and finally mine. Work came back before confidence did. I built a proposal for Nolan Price's subscription platform. Not a flashy event plan, but a blueprint for private author rooms where paying guests felt protected, not marketed to. When Nolan invited me into his Los Angeles office, he did not ask about the wedding, the empty chair, or the woman in pale satin. He slid the contract across the table, the fee already written, the authority clearly defined, and said, "I am not hiring your old reputation, Mary. I am hiring the way you understand a room." That sentence fed me in a way compliments never had. Graham had praised me when my work made his life easier, but Nolan named the work itself and put real terms behind it. I signed with a steady hand, then walked out into the California afternoon, carrying a copy of the agreement against my chest, like proof I had not imagined my own value. That night, I bought a black dress, not for a man to regret anything, but because when I tried it on, my shoulders finally remembered where they belonged. By the night of Nolan Price's launch, the invitation itself had become a quiet public test. It was not a gala where money bought a table and noise passed for status. It was a private literary platform debut in Los Angeles, built around live essays, author dinners, sponsor rooms, and audio salons where every seat had been chosen for a reason. I had spent weeks designing the flow so no writer felt displayed, no sponsor felt cheap, and no guest wondered why they had been invited. The room worked because it had rules. And for once, those rules belonged to me. Graham had to ask 3 people before someone found him a +1. I heard that from a publisher who did not mean to gossip, only to explain why his name appeared so late on the guest list. He arrived with Brooke on his arm, and from across the entry desk, I saw the pause when staff checked their names against the system. They were not escorted toward the host circle, not greeted as insiders, not offered the little courtesies Graham used to collect through me. Their badges placed them in general guest seating, and Brooke's smile tightened before the first drink was served. I did not go out to watch them. I had author timing to confirm, a sponsor room to reset, and a dinner host who needed reassurance that 2 feuding editors would not share a table. Still, their discomfort moved through the room faster than they did. Graham shook hands with a podcaster who once called him brilliant, but the man glanced over his shoulder and asked someone else, "Is Mary running this?" A lifestyle sponsor Graham had courted for months told him the evening felt very considered, then turned away before Graham could claim any part of it. Brooke tried harder, which made everything worse. She stepped into a conversation near the bar and offered that she had helped Graham understand lifestyle positioning, but an editor in a black slip dress looked at her glass, then at Brooke, and answered, "Tonight is about trust, not packaging." Brooke's lips parted, then closed, because there was no soft voice that could rescue her from a sentence that precise. Graham stood beside her with his jaw locked, finally inside one of my rooms, without a single door opening for him. I came in through the staff corridor after checking the last seating change, and nobody announced me. The black dress I had bought in Silver Lake fit without asking for attention. Square at the neckline, clean at the waist, quiet enough to let my posture do the talking. I wore no ring, no necklace from Graham, nothing that belonged to the version of me he had planned to use and retire. The room turned anyway, because every table, every author queue, every sponsor room, every calm face at the door had my fingerprints on it. I saw Graham before Brooke saw me. He stood near the bar with his badge hanging too low, looking at the room like a man locked outside his own memory. His face tightened when our eyes met, but mine kept moving, because I had a dinner timing issue near the lounge and a tablet full of work that mattered more than his regret. Brooke noticed that first. Not the dress, not the confidence, but the fact that I had looked past him without stopping. She found me in the side lounge while I was checking the author arrivals. "Mary, I'm glad you're okay," she began, soft enough for anyone nearby to mistake it for kindness. "Graham has been suffering, and I know this must be hard, seeing us here together." I set the tablet down because her voice had the same careful bend I had heard through the fitting room door. When she added, "You don't have to build a life around proving you were not replaced." I picked up the water glass beside me and threw it straight into her face. The room went still as ice ran down Brooke's cheeks and softened the careful lines of her makeup. I kept my voice low, because I wanted every word to land without effort. "You did not take him from me. You helped me see what he was worth before I paid for it with my name. Graham reached us then." His jaw locked and snapped. "You went too far." I looked at the badge on his chest, then back at him. "Farther than using my name to get into rooms you were never invited to?" Nolan stepped beside me, calm and precise, and told security, "These guests are disturbing my lead architect." After the launch, Graham did not disappear in one clean, dramatic fall. His agency stayed open, but the good rooms stopped calling, and that was the punishment he could not argue with. The Seattle salon moved to another booking partner. The Portland club renewed its preferred list without him, and 2 authors who once answered him directly began sending assistants. Brooke tried to post soft captions about starting over, but the women who had watched security walk her out of Nolan Price's event answered with silence. Graham ended things with her quietly, not because he had grown kinder, but because she no longer helped him get anywhere. He had loved doors, rooms, names, access, and the feeling of standing beside a woman who made him look invited. Once Brooke could not provide that. Even his excuses lost interest in her. I heard none of it from him, and I did not need to, because the rooms had already said enough. Russell kept opening his bookstore before noon and texting me photos of the front table. Lila flew down for one of my dinners and cried into her napkin when she saw me speak without glancing over my shoulder. Nolan did not rush me into romance or make my recovery another role to perform. He took me to dinner after the event. Let me choose the place. Let me order first. And listened while I talked about work. That night, I went back to my Silver Lake studio, set my badge beside a bowl of soup, and saw a message from an unknown number, "Mary. I just want to talk." I deleted it, opened the window, and let the night air move through the room. It was small, clean, and mine, with no chair waiting for anyone else. If this story felt familiar, remember this tonight. Peace can look like one deleted message, one warm meal, and a life where your name is no longer borrowed, managed, or explained by someone who never deserved it in any room again.